So if you've spent any amount of time in goth spaces online whatsoever, then you've probably noticed this discourse, because it has been absolutely plaguing my timeline, and my friends are sick of hearing me talk about it. I'm sick of trying to talk about it without having all my thoughts organized, because this issue goes a lot deeper than I think most people realize or acknowledge. And so I wanted to just kind of make a little think piece on it, you know, just kind of get my thoughts organized, get what I want to say out there, and maybe start an actual real discussion rather than what has been going on instead. Because I think this conversation has gone from commercialization to just straight up weird misogynistic territory. Oh yeah, here we go. Here comes a teenage boy talking about misogyny. Fuck, we're in for a good ride, I know. Please just hear me out, please. I swear I have semi-intelligent things to say, I promise. But before we get into any of that, I just wanted to take a second to introduce myself. Hello, my name is Lynn. I know for a fact that none of you watching this know who I am, and that is because this is my first video that I will be posting to this channel. Well, not really. I mean, I made this when I was like 10, and I used to post stuff like when I was there. That's why I still have like some amount of subscribers. But obviously that was like 7 years ago, and that content was significantly different than the content that I am posting with this video, and might continue to post in the future. I don't know how well this is gonna do. This is kind of a shot in the dark. But anyways, let's get into it. Like I said, if you have spent literally any amount of time in goth online spaces recently, you've probably noticed this recurring target. Creators like, what's her name, Pinky Chew, or other goth adjacent sex workers have become the center of constant discourse. Every few weeks, another viral post appears criticizing them for profiting from goth aesthetics, reducing an entire subculture to just a fetish, or attracting people who don't actually care about goth music or culture. And here's the thing. Some of those criticisms aren't baseless, but somewhere along the way, a conversation about commercialization became a conversation about women's sexuality, sex work, and who deserves to exist in alternative spaces. The criticisms stopped being about preserving a subculture and started becoming something much uglier. So today I want to unpack this as carefully as possible, because I actually do think that there are several truths existing at once. You can believe goth is being commodified. You can believe people exploit aesthetics for profit. You can believe gatekeeping has an important role in preserving subcultures. And you can also believe that the online obsession with sex workers has become misogynistic, anti-sex work, historically uninformed, and ultimately aimed at the wrong people. First, why are people upset? To understand this conversation, we have to acknowledge where it starts. Goth isn't just an aesthetic. Groundbreaking, I know. But it's a music-based subculture that has decades of history, emerging from the post-punk in the late 70s to early 1980s. The fashion exists because of the music and the community, not the other way around. For people who've spent years collecting records, going to clubs, supporting local scenes, and participating in the culture, it can feel really annoying when the internet reduces goth to big titty goth GF. Suddenly every algorithm rewards fishnets, crosses, heavy eyeliner, and lingerie. Nobody asks what bands someone listens to anymore. No one discusses the history. The music disappears. The subculture becomes an aesthetic for packaged consumption. And that is fucking annoying. I get it. That's not just some boomer complaint that appeared out of the woodwork. I mean, that is an actual issue. And this isn't just unique to goth either. Punk has dealt with this, metal has dealt with this, grunge, emo, rave culture, skateboarding, you name it. The internet has a tendency to flatten subcultures into aesthetics because aesthetics are easy to sell. So when goths criticize commercialization, they're actually pointing at something legit. One thing I think the internet has gotten wrong is the idea that all gatekeeping is inherently toxic. Sometimes gatekeeping is just another word for maintaining the boundaries that define a community. If literally anyone can call themselves goth without engaging with the music, the history, or the subcultures, then eventually the word stops meaning anything. Subcultures need some boundaries to survive. Otherwise, they become marketing categories. Communities have always had ways of teaching newcomers, learning the music, learning the history, going to shows, participating. That's not elitism by default, especially in an era where algorithms constantly erase context. So, yes, I do think some forms of gatekeeping are healthy. Not because people should be excluded for arbitrary reasons, but because subcultures deserve to remain subcultures. But I feel like along the way, something has changed. The problem is that the conversation hasn't stayed about commercialization. It's become incredibly personalized. Instead of criticizing systems, people criticize women. Instead of discussing algorithms, they obsess over individual creators. Instead of asking why sexualized goth content succeeds, they attack the people making it. And increasingly, the criticism isn't, this content misrepresents goth. It's, she's a poser. Sex workers aren't real goths. Women like this deserve harassment. OnlyFans is ruining goth. I'm sure you've heard that being said at some point or another. But at that point, we're no longer having a conversation about subcultures. We're having a conversation about misogyny. I'm gonna be fighting off the performative male comments so hard in this one, and I don't give a fuck. You cannot bully me into having shitty opinions, okay? You can't, okay? I'm tired. You know what? If I end up making another video, that's what it's gonna be about. That is what it is going to be about, because that shit pisses me off. Even though, again, I do understand where it comes from, and I know it's valid, and like, whatever, I get it. But also, fuck out my face, you know what I'm saying? Whatever, that's completely off topic. Kind of. It has to do with misogyny and patriarchy and all those wonderful things. So maybe not so much, but let's get back on topic. The internet has always sexualized goth women. This is the part that I think gets ignored the most often. People act like sex workers invented the whole goth GF stereotype. They didn't. Long before OnlyFans existed, long before TikTok, long before Instagram, alternative women were already being fetishized. The big titty goth GF meme wasn't created by goth women. I promise you it wasn't. Every single goth woman I've ever interacted with hates that shit. They hate it. But it exploded because of mainstream culture. Especially straight men, straight normie men, turned goth women into an exotic fantasy. The same thing happened with emo girls. The same thing happened with scene girls, punk girls, just alt girls in general. These normie men repeatedly transform women from niche subcultures into fantasy archetypes, and then those women get blamed for being sexualized. It's bass-ackwards. So why are sex workers the face of the problem? This is the question I keep coming back to. If the issue has become commercialization, then why are we angry at the women selling content? Why aren't we talking about the algorithms rewarding the sexualized content? The platforms that monetize engagement? The audiences demanding fetish content? The brands selling goth starter packs? Or maybe more importantly, the men consuming all of it? Because without that audience, the market doesn't exist. Demand creates markets. This is basic economics. People often discuss sex workers as though they're manufacturing desire from but nothing. But markets don't work that way. If millions of men search for goth GF, if they consistently reward sexualized goth imagery, if they financially support creators making this content, then that's where the incentives go. Sex workers are responding to demand. They didn't invent it. Now, does that mean every choice they make is beyond criticism? No, not at all. A creator absolutely can contribute to a flattening subculture into an aesthetic. That's fair game for criticism. But we should distinguish between contributing to a trend and causing it, because those are not the same thing. The thing I think we like to forget is that the history of goth isn't exactly puritanical. Something else that gets lost in these discussions is goth's actual history. Goth has always had complicated relationships with sexuality. Its aesthetics borrowed heavily from BDSM imagery. from fetish fashion, from glam, from horror, from queer nightlife, from club culture, from transgressive art. Sexual expression has never been foreign to goth. That doesn't mean goth equals kink, it doesn't, but it does mean that the idea that goth should be completely desexualized is historically selective. The subculture has always played with eroticism. So when people speak as though sexuality itself is what contaminates goth, I think they're just rewriting history. The issue isn't sexualization, the issue is reduction. Reducing an entire culture to sexuality, that is the issue, and those are not equivalent. The distinction between commercialization and moral panic matters significantly in this conversation. Criticizing commercialization is one thing, but turning that criticism into moral panic about sex workers is something else entirely. One asks, how do we preserve a subculture? And then the other asks, how do we punish women? Those are radically different conversations. And unfortunately, online discourse often slides from the first into the second without anyone noticing. Misogyny, I've noticed, especially online, oftentimes hides within valid criticism. One of the hardest things about internet discourse is that prejudice often attaches itself to legitimate concerns. Take Lily Tino, for example. Many people criticize the way that she rage baits her audience for engagement, or the way that her content tends to pander towards possibly a younger audience. But that has just opened the gates to a flood of transphobia, and all of it is just wrapped up in these seemingly valid criticisms and concerns. But that's just led to the conversation devolving from these valid concerns to just straight bigotry. A criticism can be in good faith, absolutely, but then they attract people who don't actually care about the original issue, or people who simply dislike women, or dislike sex workers, or resent attractive women online. Suddenly, every thread becomes full of comments that were never even about goth in the first place. We've seen this happen over and over across internet culture. Stated concern isn't always the real motivation. Now, let's imagine tomorrow, every single goth sex worker disappeared. Would goth stop being commodified? Fuck no. Fast fashion brands would still sell gothcore. Algorithms would still reward aesthetics over substance. Pinterest would still flatten the culture. TikTok trends would still exist. Men would still fetishize alternative women. Nothing fundamental changes, which suggests that these creators aren't the root cause. They're just one visible part of a much larger ecosystem. And focusing all our outrage on them risks confusing symptoms for causes. So where should the energy go? If people genuinely want to preserve goth, go support goth bands. Go to local shows. Introduce newcomers to the music. Teach the history. Encourage participation. Build community. Celebrate the culture. Those actions preserve goth far more effectively than spending months bullying a couple of women on the internet. Women who are 100% profiting off of these conversations, by the way. It's all just free promo. All those videos that starts off with clips of these sex workers with the caption fake goth above it, and then it transitions to supposed real goths, or the people who just play clips from that one YouTube video where they start talking about, oh, fuck the system, blah, 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 and then just clown on them for like way too many minutes at a time. I don't think people realize that that's just free promo. You are unknowingly giving these women a free advertisement for their content, which they obviously profit from. If you really want these women to be completely out of this business, then stop giving them ammo. Ignore them and they'll fade into obscurity. But again, I don't think a lot of people really realize that. Or I don't think people even care, honestly, because it gives them content and it gives them some agreeable opinion that they can latch onto, and they can make endless amount of content off of. It's really just bottom of the barrel, the lowest hanging fruit possible, and the fact that it's even gone this far and turned into that is in itself an issue. These women are not being harmed by this dog pile as much as you want to think that they are. They're really not. If nobody knew they existed, then they wouldn't be making any money off of this. But I feel like a lot of us are the reason that people know they exist. Does that make any sense? I don't know. But final thoughts, I think it's completely reasonable to care about commercialization. I think it's reasonable to defend subcultures. I think some gatekeeping is healthy when it's protecting history rather than excluding people for arbitrary reasons. But I don't think endless dog piles against individual sex workers accomplish any of that. Because the people who transformed Goth into a mass market fantasy weren't primarily Goth women. They were platforms, algorithms, consumer culture, brands, and yes, millions of normie men who decided that alt women were their newest fantasy to consume. Sex workers exist inside that economy. They're participants. Sometimes they're beneficiaries. Sometimes they contribute to the aesthetic flattening. But they didn't build the machine. If our goal is actually preserving Goth, then our analysis should be as sophisticated as the problem itself. Otherwise, we end up punishing the most visible women instead of examining the culture that made them profitable in the first place. And I think that's a mistake. Not because criticism is wrong, but because criticism is most useful when it's aimed at the structures creating the problem, not just at the people surviving within them. But hey, I don't know. This issue is very, 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 very multifaceted. Every video I've seen, every perspective I've seen, although mostly it's just making fun of these sex workers. Some of the actual discussions that I've seen, rare, but I've seen them, they all seem to have different takes on what has been going on. So I think this is a very nuanced issue. There is a real conversation surrounding it. There is something to be talked about here. So, let me know your thoughts. If you think that I am the dumbest person on the planet, let me know nicely. Please don't be mean about it. If you're mean about it, then I'm just gonna think that you're being mean just to be mean. I'm not gonna listen to you. That's how general criticism delivery works. The internet needs to learn that, I think, too. If they're trying to discourage these women from stopping their sex work by making fun of them, they're just gonna think, oh, this person's making fun of me, and they're not gonna take it as valid criticism, you know what I'm saying? But let me know your thoughts, and if there's something that you don't think I covered, or if there's something that I'm genuinely missing, please talk about it, please. Thank you so much for watching. If you fuck with me and you fuck with the video, interact, subscribe, please. If this video does well enough, I might make more. I've always wanted to make videos like these. It's just that I'm a coward. Also, if you really do want to support me, check my community posts, because I just posted a GoFundMe. I have a lot going on, toxic family, I turned 18 in less than a week, and I am mega boned. And also, I do art, and I take commissions. So if you are also interested in commissioning me, my Instagram tag will also be up on the screen somewhere. No pressure, no pressure. I am, like, fucked, though, so if you want to see me not be homeless, a couple bucks would make all the difference, or at the very least just some interaction or some engagement or just sharing. That would really help me out a ton, so thank you so much for that. Peace.